Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions, where we are critical, not cynical, of the music we listen to. I'm your host, Bryan. We're going to be checking out a special selection today, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. If you have your own song you'd like to suggest for a special selection, you can find a link to do so in the description below. Today's comes at us from Boss Penguin, says Ash Borer. My curse was raised in the darkness against the Doomsday Silence. Please make sure it's the high quality video. Thanks. Well, I took that a step further, and we're going to be using Apple Music today for this just to ensure I have the highest quality on this, because with this album art, I got fears, man. Black metal fears. So let's dive into this, see what Ash Borer is bringing to the table today. Interesting. Very ambient, bit eerie. Very slow tempo. Nothing on the left side yet other than the mosquito buzzing around. Really digging into that creepiness there. Yeah, actually, because of the reverb, it almost sounds like it's a little swung. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, because there's weight on the reverb. It's not a perfect eighth note. Or a delay, maybe? Yeah, really digging into the eeriness, the creepiness. Everything about this is pushing towards an unsettling atmosphere. interesting time modulation going on here. Feels like the song is getting stretched in places, almost like very quickly utilized fermatas. I like the use of static. I'm not a big fan of the single-sided production. Yeah, I figured we were going to get out of that quickly though. Yeah, once again, time. I swear, all three of these instruments are at a different tempo. What is going on? The bonkers thing is, they're kind of taking like a post-hardcore or math rock approach to this by having both guitars do wildly different things. Not something I hear too often in black metal. I just realized I have such a hard time hearing the bass kick. The snare and the cymbals are very present. If there's a bass, I'm not hearing it either. A bass guitar. Or any lower instruments. dig the oppression of these guitar tones here in the slower bits with these suspended notes. There is no way I could transpose this. The tempo is just constantly in flux. I haven't heard a section yet with a static tempo. It's kind of beyond me. Part of the charm, though, for sure. Clear example right here of the varying intensity that the drummer's utilizing. I hear the bass kick. This is a fascinating listen. That was wild. For like 6 bars, decided not to use the snare to accent. How are they in unison on this retardando? Very interesting bookends on this track. That was something. Ah, so something I promote on this channel a little bit. You've probably heard the phrase before, be critical, not cynical. It is okay to find faults with the music or for a music to not work for you, but it needs to be spoken about in a way that is clear and non derogatory. I'm not here to put anything down or call it trash. I acknowledge wholesale this track is not for me. There are many aspects about it that I do not enjoy listening to. But that doesn't mean that it's devoid of positive things to speak about. On the flip side, I also try not to be too negative about music, especially in the sense that not all music needs to be palatable. There are a lot of there's a lot of compositional components of this track that to me feel like mistakes, but it's quite possible it's all done intentionally. So, another aspect of this be critical, not cynical, is to give the benefit of the doubt that the music is exactly as the artists crafted it to be. It's exactly how they wanted it to be. It's exactly how it sounded in their mind, brought to life through sound waves. In that sense, I'm going to speak about some things that caught my ear. But I'm going to use, what is that, neutral terminology to not indicate one way or the other as best I can to still speak about these concepts without saying that they were right or wrong. I want to bring this up as a preface. I don't think I've ever brought this up before a song before, just because there's so many elements in here that feel wrong to me. They feel like poor executions of good ideas. But I don't want to wrap my entire video around that concept of saying, hey, these guys have really good ideas, they just couldn't execute them. They couldn't perform what they wanted for one reason or another. I don't want to go that angle. But there is a lot in here. There's definitely more things that caught my ear that sounded odd than things that sounded normal or natural or typical. And so I don't want this to be a negative analysis or a negative review. I do want to speak about it more positively. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to be as neutral as I can while still bringing up the same topics that interested me for one reason or another. The first, I can't avoid it, is the intro and the outro. Very interesting ideas. The outro is more or less what seems to be to my ears is an automated modulation of an electronic sound, or maybe even just a sound. Maybe it is one of the guitars fading out and they just found a way to stretch it so that it never actually hit zero, and they looped it and warped it and flipped it and all sorts of stuff to give it this swirling electronica kind of thing going on. Very interesting thing to pair after 16 minutes of lo-fi black metal. I honestly have no idea how the two are connected. I was really trying to piece that together, but the cool thing is it felt natural. Like I said, part of that is maybe it actually was a guitar tone, because the right guitar was just kind of being noise for most of the end. A lot of tremolo picking, and I actually learned this weekend, I think, from someone on the Discord, that tremolo picking is not just playing fast. I've been utilizing it interchangeably for anybody playing 16th notes, and that is not correct. Tremolo picking is actually playing as fast as you can without regard for the tempo. Utilized often in black metal and shoegaze, and probably some other stuff. I think post rock, post metal utilize this often. You're not caring so much about playing the notes in time as much as getting as many hits as you can to create the texture based off of your guitar tone, which is something we see a lot in here. Um, that's kind of going on in a lot of the last like 2 minutes on our right pan guitar. So maybe it is just they stopped tremolo picking and the note began to resonate, and then they just fed that into I don't know, software that modified it and allowed it to loop around and stuff like that. In which case, that would be a bit of a natural transgression into that idea. But I didn't hear any sort of resolution or positivity in the chords in that last 30 seconds or so that led into that outro. So while there might have been some sonic qualities that carried over between the two and kind of smoothed over the transition there isn't really anything thematically going on in the song that can tie the two together. There's a lot of contentment and resolution in that. Well, maybe not resolution. There's contentment though. There's just a state of being without worry or care or even any other emotional aspect. It's not really happy, but it's not sad, and it's not angry, and it is kind of calm and chill, but I think that kind of goes with just being content with things. Nothing else in the song really worked on that, and nothing at the end really transitioned into it. But I also need to pair that against the intro, which started out interestingly with the guitar and some ambient sounds, and then eventually a second guitar, and everything really leaning into this eerie creepiness. Which, for a song called My Curse Was Raised in the Darkness Against the Doomsday Silence, as a little cheesy as that might be, I think it fits well with a lot of what black metal aims for, so I don't think it's too far out of place. But the opening of this song definitely resonates with that. We have a darkness and a doomsday silence, so we don't have speech, we don't have light. It is the end of times, and a curse was born from this and applied to somebody. Yeah, that's going to be eerie, that's going to be creepy, that's going to be very unsettling. The music captures all of that very well with the isolation of the guitars, the sparseness of some of the lines. There's plenty of space in the, not just in the composition of it, but in the sound sphere. There's a lot of space, and the instruments are taking up so little of it. But again, I find very little thread tying this to the 16 minutes of black metal or the 90 seconds of the contentment at the end of the track. It just seems to be three separate ideas. Um, Almost as if they wrote the black metal segment but didn't like the intro or the outro and just found these really nice ideas and fleshed them out a little bit and said, I'll just stick them on the ends. And it's a very good intro. It's a good outro. They don't really connect to anything else. They seem isolated and disparate. So that was one of the first things I picked up on. Really great ideas. Actually, really great execution there. The intro is pretty phenomenal. But it didn't really lead into the black metal idea very well. And then tying that into the outro as well. Now we got to talk about this black metal section. We actually move between two modes, although not too frequently. There is the full-on thrashy kind of style of playing where everybody is just ridiculously fast, alternating snare and bass kick at a ridiculous speed, 16th notes in both of our guitars. I don't know if there is a bass or any lower range instrument that what they would be doing. Honestly, never heard it. Lots of attacks, lots of intensity, lots of aggression. This is contrasted with a section that's, well, several sections that all embody the same idea, a largeness. It continues on with this oppressive sound, but less attacks. It finds that oppression through timbre. Whereas in the faster picked sections, we hear less of the notes and more of just the attack. You constantly hear the string being having pressure put against it and released, and that tension, right? It's that constant attack, the constant picking over and over and over. You don't really get to hear the note resonate at all. It doesn't really get held out. These sections do that, and the tones that they have on the guitars are large. They're massive sounds. They're very crunchy, very gritty. Tons of distortion and compression put on them to just really give them this wide, large feeling. And when these notes resonate and they get held out for, I mean, even a quarter note feels so much longer than the 16th and 16th plus notes that we'll get in the faster section. And we'll go over that 16th plus later because that is not an official terminology. There's some fun stuff going on. I can't wait to get to it. But this brings about a monstrous weight to it. It's oppressive, but oppressive like a giant. Slow moving, but very large and looming. Same feeling, kind of, but different meaning. Different type of oppression, different type of weight. And it's very interesting to hear them jump between these two. Because when I think back on the black metal section, I think of one idea, one thing. It all feels like the black metal section to me. I don't really feel nuance in between, but there certainly is. And it's interesting how they achieve a very similar vibe from start to finish on it through two different styles. I like that. It shows an understanding of what they're trying to craft and multiple approaches to achieve that feeling while retaining a unified sound from start to finish. Well, as far as start of the black metal and end of the black metal, the ideas throughout here are very solid. One of the cool things I want to point out, and that I did point out in the reaction, is the duality of the guitars. A lot of the time when we listen to black metal, both guitarists do the same thing. There typically is hard panning to left and right, but they are playing the same thing. Occasionally we'll get some harmonies, usually really fun harmonies. I feel like they're fourth based, where one instrument is playing what would be the root and the other one would be four steps up in the key. But here they kind of take a math rock or post-hardcore approach where each instrument does its own thing, sometimes so wildly different that it almost sounds like they're playing two different sections simultaneously, not too dissimilar from math rock and post-hardcore. This is wild because the production doesn't really support it, but it works anyways. And it's nothing I've heard before in black metal. I don't think. We've listened to a ton of black metal. If I had to guess, it is the genre that I have reacted to the most. I don't know why. There are very few times I've finished a black metal reaction and said I've got to go check out more of that. In fact, I'm fairly confident at least the majority of the videos I end up saying it's not really my cup of tea, but here's some cool things I heard. I don't know why people keep throwing black metal my way. I appreciate it. I have no problem diving more into the genre and seeing if there's anything I can grab onto. I'm still surprised. This song surprised me. Maybe not in the ways the requester wanted it to, but it did surprise me. But black metal's just really not my cup of tea, but we'll continue to listen to it. I've never heard anything like this, I don't think. The two guitars wildly just doing their own things. There is almost as if they were recorded at two separate times, or I don't even know. it's just bonkers how in some of these sections, just how different of an idea they're doing. And here's a fun thing. This is very lo-fi. The bass end is pretty much non-existent. There's not much separation going on at all, aside from our intro, which had a really nice use of space in it. The sound is just very full. 3 instruments take up the entire sound sphere. And aside from the panning, there's no attempt to separate any of it. The vocals, I almost forgot they existed. There are vocals. They're so far pushed into the mix that, like I said, sometimes I didn't even hear them. I'm sure that of the times I actually heard vocals, there's probably just as many that I didn't. Because there were certainly a few when I was very faint. I was like, oh, there's vocals here. What are they? I don't know. All I hear is static in the background that sounds rhythmic, like speaking. Um, Definitely lo-fi. The lo-fi does a fantastic job at hiding things. And I think it hides the tension that can arise from our two guitars doing totally different things that at times don't even feel like they should work together. And I don't even really want to say that because I think hiding things kind of sounds disingenuous and kind of has a negative connotation to it, but it is true. I've talked about this before. I don't think it is a controversial take to say that utilizing compression to take off the core characteristics of notes and timbres and to remove some of the nuance in the sound can obfuscate any issues with the sound. If you remove components of two sounds that might clash, they're going to clash less. You're basically smoothing off some of the sound wave itself so that they can line up a little bit better. That is a terrible analogy, but it's, in layman's terms, I think it kind of works at selling the idea of how compression can help with this. When you get ultra lo-fi like this, and everything starts to just sound like this wall of sound, this very narrow wall of sound, nuanced ideas can kind of just bleed into the texture of the song. And I think when we do that with ideas that are supposed, or that would typically be clashing, if we just took two violins and gave them these same lines, it would not sound anywhere near as palatable as this. Some of the sections, anyways, not all of them. Some of the sections actually worked a lot better than I would expect, given some of the other sections that are a little shakier, consonant-wise. The dissonance could be implied. It could be intentional. So I don't want to say it's shaky. It could be exactly what they want out of it. But as far as consonance goes, some of these ideas are more resonant than others. And the more dissonant ones would sound absolutely terrible without all of the distortion and compression to kind of shave off the harshness of it and round it all out to something that is a bit more palatable. As far as this goes, you still have to enjoy black metal, but you're not really going to be turned off by the dissonance or the clashing of these two ideas, I should say. So that's another thing I picked up on. We got the lo-fi production, and we have the dual guitars that just, it's everywhere. Like every section is both guitars doing their own thing. It's kind of bonkers. I don't know if this is the last thing. It is the last major thing I can think of right now, but maybe I'll pick something up while I'm thinking about this. Timing. At the very beginning, I think it was the intro, I tried to conduct it. And I think I was rushing the first time because, I mean, it was very slow and we didn't have a drum to give us interbeats. So I was having to rely on my own internal metronome and timing to find beats 2 and 4 because we were only getting an emphasis on 1 and 3. And I was off for a couple of times, which is normal. You gotta get into the feeling of it, but it took longer than I expected, longer that's typically normal for me to find the groove. And then that's when I realized that the groove wasn't static, and that's why I couldn't find it. And this continued in every section of the track. It was disguised a little better in the tremolo picking and alternating bass and basically the 16th note sections. But if you break down those sections to just the core beats and you listen to the accented hits, you'll realize that there's no consistency in the tempo there either. And then we hit this wild section, like, I don't know, 7, 8 minutes in. All three instruments, the two guitars and the drums, were doing completely different tempos. None of them were in time with each other at all. Plus, there was a weird time signature thing going on where it was like 3 bars of 4 and then just this timelessness that changed every repetition. The drums just stopped playing altogether. They came back in on 1 at the beginning of the phrase again. And in this little timeless pocket, the guitar would do a run and the other guitar would do a different idea, and they just kind of hold out a note for a second, kind of like everybody's saying, "We ready to get back on 1?" And they start on 1 again, and then they separate. They're all on their own time again. And then we get back up to this timelessness. The drums cut out, and the two guitars do a little lick, and everybody looks together. And they land back on 1 and then separate again. It is a bonkers section. Beats 2, 3, 4, the next set of 1, 2, 3, 4, and then just this section with no tempo. It really broke my brain. And I'm not one to shy away from free time. I've played my fair share of free time stuff. I think it's phenomenal. I love free time. A free time duet is crazy. It's possible, but it really takes a lot of synchronicity between the two performers. To combine free time, which is a time signature thing, with free tempo is to invite levels of chaos unheard of in music. I've listened to avant-garde musics in a few different genres. I love avant-garde for the most part, artistically speaking. I don't listen to avant-garde casually very often. But artistically, I talk all the time about music that pushes the envelope. I love hearing the horizon of music get pushed just a little bit further away from me, where what is palpable and possible to do in music is expanded every day, every time I listen to something like this. I have never heard anyone do this way, where everybody is about the same tempo, but not. And at the end of every lick, we're also going to do a free time thing where the drums are just going to stop playing and we're just going to kind of feel it out until we decide it's time to get back on 1 again. In which case, we'll all land on 1 and get back on our own tempos separately. It really boggles the mind, but it is fascinating how they make it work and not fall apart. This idea is revisited again later in the track, like 14 minutes in or something like that. This one really felt like it was going to fall apart. Once again, all three of our instruments are doing wildly different things, but our drums are doing this triplet eighth note thing with like bass kick and tom heavy runs that is pushing real hard against the straight eighth, well, I guess straight 16th note tremolo picking ish stuff. I say that because it is tremolo picking. I feel like they are just picking as fast as they can. It just happens to be very close to the tempo, but it is not in time with the tempo. So that's why I say 16th plus, because it might actually be like 17th notes, which is not something we typically utilize. But if they can cram 17 notes into a 4/4 bar, then they're 17th notes. I don't even know how to. I mean, I guess there would be a special way to notate that. I don't want to imagine it though. A 17th note. Anyways, not only are they all on their own tempos now, but they're also on their own metric modulations, where some people are working closer to a divisible, symmetrically divisible 4/4 idea, and others are working on asymmetrically divisible 4/4s. We have a technically 3 against 4 idea where the 4 is also loose and might be a 4.1. 3 against 4. It's just. And this doesn't even take into the account that every section that isn't this wild, everybody do their own flair thing is constantly in temporal flux. The tempo is usually about a number, but sometimes can rush and sometimes can drag, and usually the band is pretty good at staying together on that, but when one of your instruments is tremolo picking, their job isn't really to stay on the tempo. So they're going to kind of be off anyways. So your drummer's going to have their own internal one. They're supposed to be setting the metronome. What's your other guitar supposed to listen to? The tremolo picking or the drumming? And if the drummer's slightly getting off every once in a while and your guitarist is slightly getting off the tempo every once in a while, what point of reference do you have at that point? There is no static tempo anymore. All this is to say that this was 16 minutes of riding a unicycle on a tightrope where the rope itself, the diameter of it is shrinking every second, and the distance between the two poles that you're supposed to be going is also changing all the time. You don't ever know if you're actually getting closer or farther away from being done with this stunt, and people are watching and hoping you get to the other side, and somehow they did. The song finished without falling apart, and I'm honestly boggled by it. There are two interpretations for all of this. I mentioned that I want to go with the benefit of the doubt, that they intentionally utilize a fluctuating tempo and free tempo ideas mixed with wild phrasings at times, and even a disregard for tempo altogether with the use of tremolo picking in order to create a song that is a whirlwind of tension. At every given moment, not only do we have the intensity of the black metal, which always brings its own intensity to the table due to the thrash metal style of playing, but we also have tension because all of our instruments are in flux. There is no rigid element of tempo or even time signature at some points to hold on to and grasp as a sort of constant. Everything is a variable, and that is stressful. It is wildly ambitious to attempt this if this is the case, but the execution is well worth it because they can really lean into an emotion much stronger than if anybody attempted to do the same thing while still being perfectly in time. The other side is that this group of people wrote a track that was way beyond their skill level, and they're doing their best to keep up with it, but lack the precision to do so. And even in some cases, lack the compositional skills to create the three-way counterpoint they want at times in a palatable way. I don't know what the case is. I do want to lean towards the former, but there's so many elements in here that tell me it's the latter. It would take experts to achieve the same thing intentionally, as I believe was done semi-accidentally. I don't think they were unaware of some of the less palatable aspects of this track, but I do feel like they are happy with it. Maybe it was sort of intentional. Maybe they wanted some of this extra elements in the music, and their lack of skill playing the guitars, or even just the lack of endurance to play at the speeds, I should say, that's more accurate, helped them achieve this. I honestly don't know. But regardless, it served for a fantastic conversation. There's so many neat things in here that I've never heard in black metal, I've never heard in music, which I'm excited about. I will probably never listen to this track again. I did not enjoy it. But there's always things to learn, and it doesn't always take a maestro to include those elements into a song. Normally here we'd bring up the lyrics, but I honestly can't find any. I searched quite a few places and nobody's got this band. Uh, Utilizing Apple Music for the highest quality audio I could get, I was kind of hoping that they had the lyrics, and they don't as well. I'm honestly curious how that whole process works. Do the bands need to supply it? Does Apple... I don't know. I guess the bands would... if the bands have to supply the lyrics, why don't they? Why are there so many songs on Apple Music that don't have the lyrics? They don't even have to be time-stamped, though those are very neat, where the lyrics cycle through themselves automatically with the song. You can actually click on lyrics and it'll go to that part of the song. But even just typical text, dumb text file. I just don't understand releasing music without it. And there's absolutely no way I could understand any of these lyrics. Not to mention the fact that I don't even know if I heard all of them. So unfortunately, we won't be doing the lyrical dive on this, but we are 50 minutes into this, which was about 30 minutes of analysis. I'm happy with that. And hopefully, Boss Penguin, hopefully you're happy with that as well. Those are my thoughts on Ash Borer's My Curse Was Raised in the Darkness Against a Doomsday Silence. Those are just my thoughts, so you let me know what you were thinking during this song. Hit me up in the comments. Anything you'd like to add to what I said, correct me on, or just let me know if you enjoyed it or not. Above the comment section is a description box, and there is a link for Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here, which has links to everything related to the channel. You can support the channel through a variety of ways and find all of the social networks around the channel, such as Twitter and Discord. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow, though. We're going to check out some more music, 2 videos as usual, starting at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.